Traditionally, in Tibet and in the Himalayan regions, as well as in the rest of the Buddhist world and the rest of the world in general, women tended to get overlooked. In the Tibetan tradition, although for a monk there were many facilities for study and for deeper practice, mostly nuns were never educated. And because they weren't educated, they therefore usually could not participate in more profound practices. And in addition, they had no voice. Of course, throughout Buddhist history, there have been very wonderful female practitioners who have accomplished everything that needs to be accomplished, but normally their story is not told. When the Tibetan refugees moved into India, one of their first priorities was to re-establish the monasteries which had been destroyed back in Tibet. However, it took many, many years before people began to recognize that nothing was being done for the women, for the nuns, and many nuns ordained, lived their lives and died basically in a state of great devotion but total ignorance as to the meaning and practice of the Dharma. The 8th Gampo Rinpoche Dongyu Nyima had asked me on a number of occasions to start a nunnery. In those days I had no money, I had no anything. I just said, "Oh yes, Rinpoche," and put it aside. But in the mid-90s, when I was again requested by the lamas of Kampagar Monastery in Tashijong, North India, to start something for nuns, I realized this is what I really needed to do. My basic motivation was to try to give these young girls who come to us from Tibet and the Himalayan regions the kind of training I never got, and to allow them to understand that they themselves are able to carry the Dharma within them and to benefit both themselves and others. They don't have to think it's only the male side of the population who can realize anything, who can make a contribution. Just to encourage them to respect themselves and each other and recognize each other's very unique potential. Because, as I said, the female voice has not been heard up to now. And so we're hoping in the next generations to come that it will be heard and that it will be its own very special, unique voice which will be of great benefit to many beings. First of all, we had to find girls who wanted to be nuns. That was the easiest part. We had to find suitable land, and we needed to find the funding to buy this suitable land and to support the nuns. I spent about 2 years altogether looking for land in our area. It needed to be the kind of land on which one could actually build, because this is a hilly area, so a lot of land is very mountainous. It needed to have water, be fairly accessible, and not too far from Kampagar in Tashijong, which is our mother monastery. It has to be said that the monks of the Kampagar monastery have been absolutely wonderful and totally supportive towards our nuns. They really look on the nuns as their Dharma sisters, and often a senior monk will come and say, "What can I do to help the nunnery? Anything you want, please ask me." Monks from Kampagar have come every week to teach the nuns rituals and how to make tormas, how to play the various musical instruments, how to do the chanting. And through the years, these same monks have come without any payment, just out of devotion to Gampo Rinpoche and to his nunnery and the nuns. So they have all been wonderfully, wonderfully helpful. Without their help, we could not have created this nunnery. During any kind of monastic functions, the nuns are invited inside the temple. Before, they used to sit outside with the lay people. After a few years, Gampo Rinpoche one time phoned me and said the nuns should sit inside the temple, not outside the temple. So I told the nuns, Gampo Rinpoche says, "You should come inside." And so they were very nervous, but they all sort of slunk in. And meantime, one of the monks was rolling up the carpet on which the monks sit. And I said, "Well, now the nuns are coming in." Gampo Rinpoche said the nuns should sit inside the temple. And he said, well, these carpets can only be sat on by monks. This is a Kampaga custom. And I said, but, you know, the nuns are here. They can't sit on the cold floor. And he said, well, I'm really sorry, but this is only for monks. This is Kampaga custom. So I said, okay, so now we're going to change the custom. From now on, these mats can be sat on by monks and nuns of Kampaga. So he thought, and he looked at another monk who shrugged, and then he unrolled the mats again. I said to the nuns, sit down quick. So since that time, they've always put out mats for the nuns to sit on. We looked at a lot of land, but it was very hard to find anything suitable. So then I went back again to look at the land which had first been offered to us by Tashijong itself, which in the beginning I had rejected because I felt it was too small. It was only about 7 acres. But when we went back to look at the land, it had everything, except it was a little smaller than we had wanted. So then we decided to purchase it. It's, of course, not at all a traditional design for a monastery or a nunnery. I just wanted to be somewhere which would be enhancing for the nuns, nourishing and beautiful. Many nunneries which I had visited in the early days looked more like women's prisons than like a nunnery, very depressing and very minimal. And so I felt it would be more nourishing for the nuns to have an environment which was aesthetically pleasing. The architects did a very good job of designing these dormitories, which are really very striking, actually. It's circular on 2 stories. The nuns share rooms, 2 or 3 to a room. I wanted that there should be grass and flowers and an inside open courtyards so that the nuns could be out in the open, at the same time being very private. Also, I felt it would be nice to maybe have more rounded feeling rather than always endless squares and rectangles. Both in our temple and in the study center shrine room, we have tried to emphasize various female Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, because I think so often you go into a temple, even in a nunnery, and one is surrounded only by male images. And I think it's very enhancing for the nuns to be surrounded by divine female forms, as well as a few male forms, of course. Dongyu Gatsal belongs to the Drukpa Kagyu lineage, which was started in the 12th century by Sangpa Gyare, and is particularly prevalent not only in eastern Tibet in Nongchen, but also in the Himalayan border regions, especially Bhutan, Ladakh, Lahul, and Kinur. So many of our nuns come from this region, and we're the only Drukpa Kagyu nunnery which offers also an educational program. We are trying to combine academic excellence along with the yogic traditions, because we are a practice lineage. So it's not enough that the nuns intellectually understand and grasp the Dharma, but they also should have the opportunity to actually experience and realize the fruits of their academic studies. So therefore, although most of the year is dedicated to a study program, they still have everyday opportunities for quiet sitting, and in the rainy season they do a 2-month silent retreat during which they carry out the various practices of our tradition. After 6 years, the nuns are given the option to carry on with their studies or else to go in for a 3-year retreat. We are hoping also that in the future some of these girls, as more and more enter into retreat, some of them can be trained up to become yoginis or tokdemma.
My name is Dejin Chudan. I'm from Kinnaur, which is in Himalayas in India. I'm a Buddhist nun in the Tijal Nunnery. In the future, there is lots of options. Some nuns study, then some nuns living in retreat, and some is getting degrees, and some is helping the peoples. So there is lots of options to do. My aim is in the future living in retreat and get some spiritual knowledge.
But of course these girls cannot live their life of purity and dedication unless they receive some kind of help, some kind of support. Because however dedicated they may be, nonetheless they need to eat. Sometimes they get sick, they need medical help. And in general, although their aspiration towards the Dharma is very sincere, nonetheless they have physical bodies which need to be taken care of. In the future, we have to think, how are these nuns going to keep going? How can they continue with their studies and their practices and carry on without being dragged down into a lot of financial worries? Because where will they get enough support? And for this reason, we felt it made sense to try to raise an endowment fund, a corpus of money which could be invested. So they will have enough money to cover food and medical expenses and maintenance for the buildings and so forth, so they can carry on. So this is our next really big project, to try to raise enough funding so that we can help to maintain the nuns into the future. Dongyu Gatsal basically has been built on donations from people all over the world, both East and West. Without that, we could not have done anything. So we're deeply grateful to really thousands of people around the world, most of whom have never been here, many of whom I've never even met, and yet from the depths of their goodness in their hearts, they have come forward to help and support these young girls who without their help would not have the possibility to go forward in the Dharma life. So we're very, very, very grateful. It's amazing, actually.